Thank you very much, Acting Speaker, and terrific to see you in the chair here today on a bill that I'm sure you'll have much to say on yourself at some point. Acting Speaker, the Wage Theft Amendment Bill 2025 repeals the Victorian wage theft scheme following the introduction of Commonwealth laws last year through the Fair Work Legislation Amendment Act, which were designed to cover that field because, of course, as we know, Acting Speaker, the industrial relation powers sit firmly with the Commonwealth Government, and seeing that the Commonwealth has now legislated around wage theft, it's only right that we respect the Constitution and the Federation's structure of its powers and hand that back to the Commonwealth. But the bill also implements two recommendations of the Wilson Review. Now, this was a review that was established following the incredibly damning reports of criminal activities associated and involving the CFMEU on construction sites here in Victoria, and particularly construction sites that were at the taxpayer expense, big build sites, government construction sites. And of course, the CFMEU is a union with very significant ties to the Victorian Labor Party. Now, the bill before us today implements two recommendations from the Wilson Review. Recommendation 1, to establish a complaints referral function within the independent statutory body, the Workforce Inspectorate Victoria, to receive and refer complaints relating to public construction. And Recommendation 7, empowering the Workforce Inspectorate to receive reports from any person, which includes principal contractors, and then refer them to the appropriate agency. Now, we have been advised that further legislation will be brought before the Parliament this year to implement the remaining recommendations of the Wilson Review. Now, we're holding our breath on this side of the House, waiting for the government to bring forward legislation that will fully implement the Wilson Review, and looking forward to the government making sure that they are doing everything they can to ensure that they are outlawing criminal activity on construction sites, but particularly when it comes to big build sites and government construction sites here in Victoria. Because, Acting Speaker, those bombshell reports that exposed the criminal activity, the violence, the misogyny, the bullying tactics on Victorian build sites shocked every Victorian when they were exposed last year. Particularly because these are sites that Victorians are paying for. And these are sites that we know are having cost blowouts and time blowouts every single day. Now, Geoffrey Watson conducted an interim report which found that bikies were still influential within the union and that the EBA negotiations had become vulnerable to corruption. And he concluded that the Victorian branch has been infiltrated by outlaw motorcycle gangs and by organised crime figures. The Victorian branch has been caught up in a cycle of lawlessness where violence was accepted as part of the culture and threats of violence were a substitute for reasoned negotiations. Now, as was exposed at the time, we know that the Premier was sent detailed evidence in 2022 of construction union officials threatening violence on big build sites. But what did the Premier do? She took a year to reply and then only brushed off those concerns, suggesting it was a federal issue. The Premier has been caught time and time again turning a blind eye to union corruption on big build sites. The Premier was the former Minister for major projects here in Victoria. Over the past decade, she has been the key decision maker when it comes to these major projects, the key decision maker when it comes to the blowouts on these projects, on the deals on these projects. Yet the Premier, as per usual, failed to take any responsibility in terms of how the the government plans to prevent union corruption, violence, misogyny continuing on government construction sites. In fact, Acting Speaker, it's only because the CFMEU's conduct was exposed by the media that the Allan government is actually taking any action on this issue. And that was the reason that they stood up the Wilson Review. And despite vowing that the review would look into the rotten culture in the CFMEU, it has continued to be a major issue on construction sites in this state. The Wilson Review handed down 8 recommendations to tackle union corruption, but it does not go far enough. And as I said before, the legislation before us today only implements just 2 of those recommendations. So when vowing to stand up the Wilson Review to tackle that rotten culture, we're still waiting for the Wilson Review to be fully implemented. The Allan Labor government is not serious about tackling union corruption on government construction sites. Why? Because they're in bed with the union. They're more interested in protecting their mates in the union, making sure that they're doing deals on construction sites rather than actually protecting Victorian taxpayers and the people working on those sites. The allegations that have been made, the behaviour on those sites are absolutely disgusting, yet the government has still failed to implement the full Wilson Review. Now, at the time, we were very, very clear that the Wilson Review did not go far enough. It did not have the power to look deeply into the alleged criminal behaviour on those state government construction sites. Only a Royal Commission would shine a light on the dark connection between the CFMEU's behaviour and organised crimes on big build sites, because taxpayers deserve to know how their funds are being spent and used on those sites. And when you have a state that has $194 billion worth of debt in the coming years, when a state government is imposing on taxpayers an interest bill of $1.2 million an hour, Victorians deserve to know how this government is spending their money, how it is wasting their money on government construction sites to the tune of nearly $50 billion because the government has done a deal with the union movement and is more interested in protecting their relationship with the corrupt CFMEU than it is about protecting the interests of Victorians. That is the reality of the situation here. And those opposite can claim it's not, but why aren't we standing here today implementing the full Wilson Review? Why aren't we standing here today ensuring that union corruption on government construction sites cannot be permitted in any way, shape or form? This is largely a technical bill, a bill that removes wage theft legislation because the Commonwealth has taken it on. This isn't any bright idea from the government in terms of actually improving how Victorian construction sites that are funded by the taxpayer will not have organised crime, criminal activity or union corruption rife on those sites. And that's why the Liberals and Nationals called for a Royal Commission to stamp out this behaviour. We also wanted to restore integrity, and we brought legislation to this parliament, the Government Construction Projects Integrity Bill. This would have prevented bikies and known organised criminals from gaining employment on Victorian major construction projects. But what did this government do? It's a common theme. It voted it down. Once again, this is a government that is more interested in protecting their union mates than it is about actually protecting the interests of Victorians.